So, hi, welcome to whatever the heck this is.
We'll figure out a name later. We can sort that out.
We'll fix it in post. I'm Dylan.
I am Raph.
And we're this.
We are the boys, at least for now, but not the boys, but the boys.
We're these boys.
These boys.
Yeah.
All right.
So we came up with this idea where we're just gonna sit down and talk our shit. I, especially me, have been coming to Ralph a lot with some maybe controversial opinions about some anime and video games.
Yeah, Dylan has some interesting takes on some subject matters. And like one Friday night in like a Discord chat, Dylan was like, "Why don't we just like do a podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got mics. Let's do it." Yeah, and here we are.
Here we are. A few days later. So, essentially how this is going to work, one of us will come here, most likely me, with just a truly awful opinion about video game, anime, manga, whatever, what have you, and then just defend that with their life.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do we want to just get started with what?
I think so. I think you've got an interesting, salacious bit to open us up with on the inaugural episode. You want to just put it out there?
Yeah, I did. So I've said this to you before. It started out as a joke, but I truly believe this at this point. What it is, essentially, I think that all JRPGs, turn-based JRPGs, let me clarify, are archaic and bad. And if you're making a turn-based JRPG in 2022, what are you doing? Just make a better video game.
Do you feel that by default, Japanese publisher, be it Square, Atlas, whoever, Bandai, comes out and says, "Hello, we have a product. It's a Japanese RPG. It's turn-based." Do you think by default that gets you like an IGN 6 out of 10 at best?
I mean, I think it gets you an IGN 9 out of 10 by default just because it's IGN.
Okay.
But should it get you an IGN 6 out of 10 at best? Probably. Yeah, legitimately. Here's a few just to get you angry right off the start. Persona 5 should have been an action game.
Goodness.
Just look at Strikers.
Goodness, I haven't played Strikers. I purchased Strikers.
Either.
I played the vanilla game. I've got like 150 hours on that. We have end credits. Action RPG. I don't know. I don't trust it. I've
got a whole video on my YouTube channel about how I bought Persona 5 3 times, and I feel like I can't buy Strikers until I've at least beaten Persona 5 base game.
Yeah, in your defense, I haven't gone through Royal because I haven't necessarily found the time for it. But that's largely because I've been playing and enjoying other turn-based RPGs.
Like SMT 5.
Like SMT 5, Game of the Year. Don't
that
forget.
Should have been an action game.
I don't know. I think you lose a lot.
All right, so I've got a lot of opinions of why I believe this. So I don't know which one we want to start with. Do you want to start off first, or you want me to just take it from here?
I feel like since you have like you are the prosecutor, the aggressor in this instance, I'm playing defense. Why don't you put what you got on the table? Spill out your heart.
Okay, so first of all, JRPGs, specifically turn-based ones, are typically very, very, very poorly balanced. And we've mentioned this. We've talked about this a little bit.
Run of this.
But essentially, what it comes down to is that grinding in JRPGs makes the game significantly worse. But it's something that's kind of almost encouraged by the game, right?
At times. Keep going.
So I think back to the Dragon Quest XI review on Kotaku by Tim Rogers.
Classic.
Love that man. Where he said that JRPGs are better when you're underleveled.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
That's just a factual statement. That's not an opinion. That's just a fact.
I think
right?
I agree with this.
Let's also look at Pokemon Nuzlockes, right? If you don't know what a Nuzlocke is, I don't know. Use Google.
You can use a Google. I won't tell.
Yeah. So in them, typically, like in modern day Nuzlockes, people generally say you can't outlevel the next gym. Right? You go up to the level of the next gym. That's just the basic rule for Nuzlockes. Because if you over level in a Nuzlocke, it's not a challenge.
Yeah. You're not doing yourself or your experience through the game any real favors. When I was a young boy, I had this mentality where I wanted to grind 10 levels for every Pokemon in my party before the next gym, so that I'd be hitting Victory Road at around level 80. I don't advise that for anyone. I think that's a bad time for all involved.
That's an easy way to make a video game bad.
Yeah.
Now, the problem though is that Pokemon's somewhat unique in that you know if you're under or over leveled.
This
right?
is true.
You can
get
see
a very
the level.
quick, very quick read of this.
But you don't know in other JRPGs.
Elaborate.
So, like, if you're fighting a boss, right? If you're in just a generic any JRPG and you're fighting a boss and you are struggling against it, there's two possible reasons for that. All right, one, you're bad. You're just bad at the video game.
Very likely. Most days of my life, I feel this way.
Almost always, it's number one. All right, almost always. But people don't like admitting that it's number one, so they look at what the possibility of number two is. And what's number two? You're underleveled. So what people will do is they'll go and they'll grind and then they'll beat the boss. And then that also will confirm in their mind that the problem wasn't that they were bad, but that they were underleveled.
Yeah, I think going back to a discussion that we had earlier, like going in for the grinding path pretty much always is an option available to the player, but not every game is necessarily going to go out of its way to discourage it. Which I think is where the meat of the problem lies, right?
So hear me out. If a video game lets you make the game bad, it isn't the game just bad?
I don't know. I feel like there's some degree of freedom that you want to allow the player, even if they
No, people are idiots.
I agree.
Look, I mean, just blanket statement. Look at what has happened to the world when people have free will. All right, I'm not promoting a
This man's going the chaos path right now.
I mean, maybe free will is kind of an issue.
Well, maybe that's not the chaos path. Maybe that's a hard law route. He wants
was a
roads that go one direction, not the other.
But so hear me out, okay? This is gonna be maybe too hot of a trail to go for. But let's talk about Dark Souls.
Okay.
Not a JRPG. Not a turn-based JRPG.
Not a turn-based JRPG. It is a role-playing game developed in Japan. But so I think emotionally we both understand that's not a JRPG.
Do we need to establish that that's not a JRPG?
I think we do. I think like because from the get-go, before I knew the parameter for the discussion was immediately going to be turn-based RPGs, I was going to come in with a pedantic Legend of Zelda argument, which wholeheartedly I do not believe is a JRPG. But if we're going fully textually, I would say in the bad video game genre definition, it is certainly a role-playing game.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
we agree on this.
Yeah, it's not.
Emotionally, it's not.
Like, Dark Souls is a Western RPG.
Right.
It was developed in Japan, but it's a Western RPG.
Right.
Because it's stylized after the development of how RPGs developed in the West versus the East.
Have I ever told you about my first exposure to the Souls genre?
No, you haven't.
All right. So I had a PlayStation 3 during the early days of the system. This was in the like PS3 has no games memes era, right? And I enjoyed myself, the Japanese role-playing games.
Yeah.
And I saw an Atlas logo on this well-reviewed game. Looked like it had like a knight on the cover. It was called Demon Souls. There was like dragons and stuff in there.
Yeah.
Looked interesting. I wanted a JRPG at this point. I had pretty much only really played Metal Gear Solid 4 on this system.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, it's time for my first HD JRPG. This was not a JRPG.
No.
I was disappointed. I have not come back to this game. I have a PlayStation 5 now. The same bug is striking again. I'm looking at this and I'm like, that might be a Japanese role-playing game, but I don't know. I don't know.
It's not. But so talking specifically about the like Souls-like games, right? They don't allow the player to make the game bad, right?
I wouldn't say that.
Here's the thing. People have asked for an easy mode in Dark Souls, right?
Correct.
And the argument makes sense just at face value, where that it makes the game more accessible, right? It lets more people play it. But consider this, okay? Consider a world where you started playing Dark Souls and it was too difficult for your little baby brain, right? And so you turned it on to easy mode. The point of Dark Souls is that it's impossibly hard. The point of it is overcoming that mountain, right?
Right.
So if you make it easy, the game isn't the game anymore. You remove everything that makes it what it is, and what you'll get is a mediocre game.
I would agree, but this might be a hot take for another episode. I feel that it's a mediocre game by default. I don't think I think there's a lot of things you can do to make those games bad. But I'm not a big fan of those games myself. Other people are allowed to have different tastes. I won't fight this, but to me,
okay,
not a big fan.
Let's move away. Let's move away from Dark Souls then. Another example of a game that you could make easy. All right, let's look at Portal.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Portal 2, any kind of puzzle game.
Right.
But let's just specifically talk about Portal. Now, hear me out, Ralph. What if, when you're playing Portal, okay, all of a sudden you have an option where you could spend 30 minutes doing something insanely boring, and then you would solve the puzzle immediately?
That's often an option. Not in Portal. Not in Portal.
But in that would make the game worse.
Would
it not?
It would.
That would make the game very bad.
If there was an option that was like, okay, if you don't want to solve the puzzle, you can walk down this hallway for 30 minutes and you can just bypass the area. Well, would not be a fan of that.
You have no idea what landmine you've just stepped into.
Go ahead. Blow
right.
me up.
That's every JRPG.
I wouldn't say that.
It is.
I would say it's an option, much the same way that like
in Portal it'd be an option. You wouldn't have to.
I would say when you are playing bad at Portal, that is the reality of what's going on. When you're just shooting at walls, not knowing what to do, trying to figure things out.
There's a difference, because at a certain point you will realize the solution, or you'll stumble into it magically, right?
We have to acknowledge, or you could just never find it and give up, which happens.
Sure.
All right.
But assuming you solve the puzzle, right?
Right.
Either you do it through random chance, which I think is pretty unlikely in most of puzzle games, and specifically Portal. But even then, if you do it through random chance, you would still have to recognize there was a solution. You just didn't find it.
Right. I think that's like Breath of the Wild probably has that as a somewhat common situation where you're like, okay, I found a solution to this. I don't know exactly what I did. I don't know if I could replicate it. I was getting weird with the motion controls, but the puzzle is solved and let's go about our days.
Yeah.
I don't think that happens in Portal though.
Yeah, because Portal's like an actually like good puzzle game. I'm not here to blame Breath of the Wild.
Hot takes already.
But we can agree that not all of the shrines are up.
Not all created equal.
Not all of them are great. All right, some of them are not quite the same. But tests of strength.
Testing my strength right now, boy.
But so, I mean, that's just an option in RPGs. You can go through and you can just grind through the game, just level up a bunch, and then beat the boss. And you will never know if you were struggling with the boss because you were stupid and you didn't understand it, or if you were struggling with it because you were just underleveled. Now, what most people will do is they'll just blame it on being underleveled.
I think that's true. I think in just about any JRPG, you probably could do like a level 1 challenge run if you understand the mechanics deeply enough for that particular game. Yeah. I think we do see people do that on the YouTubes and the like.
Yeah.
Even if that's not necessarily the intended developer option. I think it's usually pretty easy to get a feel for what the expectation for your own level is, usually by going around other enemies in the area. But I'll allow for some grace to say like, yeah, sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. So, but then we get into an issue where I guess this is somewhat slightly separate, but random encounters are bad game design. Can we at least agree on that? Like, can we find common ground here and say that random encounters shouldn't exist?
I think random encounters are a solution to a problem that most games can, or I should say most modern games can find solutions around now.
Yeah.
I think like early generation games, like up until like 32-bit consoles, pretty excusable to have them. I don't think anyone is really expecting anything else at that point.
I mean, that's where we get to my point where I'm saying that JRPGs, like turn-based JRPGs, are archaic. I'm not saying that no JRPG has ever been good.
Right.
All right.
Okay,
that's an insane statement.
That is the statement I was getting ready to fight.
That's insane. So, like, we've talked briefly about Earthbound. Earthbound, when it was released, what was that, 92?
I think
in the 90s.
95, yeah,
95.
90s.
Yeah, in the 90s. When Earthbound was released, all right, good game.
Good game.
That's a cold take. That doesn't belong here. That's not on this table.
Oh, my gosh.
Earthbound in 2022. Now, if Earthbound were released in 2022, let's imagine a world where Earthbound never existed, and instead it were released today, right? Not a good video game.
I can't agree with that.
If an indie dev released Earthbound today, not a good video game.
I can't agree with that. I think someone did. It was called Undertale, and we loved it.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't, because Undertale, first of all, not a turn-based JRPG.
That's there are real-time actions that happen between turns, so I think that gets a little tricky to split.
In my opinion, because you added in bullet hell
Yeah.
into the
There
combat,
is bullet hell.
it's not. Look at a Sans fight and tell me that's a turn-based JRPG. All right,
But
tell me to my face.
You select an attack option to attack them, and then a number pops out of them. I think that's a turn-based RPG.
And then you play a minute of a bullet hell game,
and that's great. And we welcome that.
Yeah, let me be clear. That's great, okay? Because I'm not at throwing any shade at Undertale, because Undertale isn't a turn-based JRPG.
I can't agree with this.
It isn't.
I parts of it aren't, but even those parts exist within the framework of a turn-based system. I would say like it draws lineage from like the Mario RPGs and the Paper Marios and the Mario and Luigi's, and those certainly have real-time elements in them that I don't think Undertale is so far removed from that to put it in a different subgenre.
Ralph, right now you are an IGN reviewer, all right? And you're the person sitting there right now trying to explain to everyone why The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is an RPG.
I don't believe
You're
I am.
wrong.
I don't
You're
believe
wrong.
I am. I think it follows the majority of the genre tropes, so much so no.
It's inspired by RPG.
It certainly is inspired by it. I'm willing to shake hands on that and walk away, but I'm not gonna because it's a turn-based RPG.
It takes too many liberties with the genre as a whole. The goal isn't even to fight people.
Depending on your playthrough.
No. The goal isn't. The game actively discourages you from killing people. Anytime you do, it makes fun of you and shames you for it, as it should. Right? It's a critique of JRPGs. It is not actually a JRPG.
I would still say it's a JRPG, and I would say its sequel, Deltarun, leans even further into the JRPG tropes.
I have to doubt myself. I haven't actually played Deltarun, so
well,
I can't speak to that.
Without getting into any kind of like plot spoiler discussion, in Deltarun, you're now controlling a party of 3, right? So at that point, you're the number management and the health mitigation situation. And picking attacks on various dudes, and there's not like you still spare people in Deltarun, but it happens pretty differently. It's much more traditional in this sense.
Okay,
and I don't think that's so far removed from Undertale in and of itself to be in its own genre. In the same way that I would say something like a Valkyria Chronicles, which is like a turn-based Fire Emblem tactical RPG initially, and then once you pick a unit, it goes into a short real-time section. I would still say that's a turn-based RPG.
I mean, yeah, but it's not a turn-based JRPG.
But I would say it is. I would say it's a tactical RPG. Yeah, if we want to split hairs further.
It's a tactics RPG that was developed in Japan, but it's clearly something different because it's stepped too far away from the genre.
Okay.
But I think we're a little too much in the weeds right now.
Fair.
To expand back out to the Earthbound point. You have to understand that anytime you look at a game that you played as a child, there is inherent like nostalgia bias, right?
For certain.
Like, even if you try and take that away, you can't, right? You still are going to look back on it fondly and still think of it and give it more grace than you would a modern game, right?
Yeah.
So if it had no attachment to the Mother series, if it had no attachment to your childhood or anything, if you'd never seen the game before, you wouldn't be giving it as much liberty. Would you still love it and appreciate it? Maybe. But you would have a lot harsher critiques of it, right?
Maybe. It's...
I mean,
like, I think from like the visual like engine level, certainly that's kind of hard to separate from the era that it was made. But let's say Mother 3, I didn't play until like 2011 because the fan translation had to happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's personally my favorite game. You and I know that that's my favorite game. I don't know if the audience knows that, but now you know this. Now you know this. But I also didn't play Earthbound when it was of its time. I played it on like the Wii Virtual Console, which did not have Earthbound on it. I need to add that was, some things had to happen to allow that to happen. But it's on the Wii U Virtual Console now, so I guess that's better. It's on the SNES Classic. I guess that's better. It's not on the Switch. What the heck?
We don't need to get into that.
Yeah. But anyway, I think if you come in and you're like Earthbound drops $60 titles, no visual like accoutrements to bring it up to modern standards, but it plays identically. I think the gameplay is still strong in that game. I think the combat in that game is still a feather in its cap.
I think that it's impossible to look at a game that was released 30 years ago
Mhm.
without some part of your brain recognizing it as something that was released 30 years ago.
I think that's fair.
So even if you were to play it today, right?
Right.
So I recently started playing Mother 3,
Mhm.
and I am going to be judging it as a game that released like what, 20 years ago?
Yeah, but it's a Game Boy Advance game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a Game Boy Advance game. But I'm going to be looking at it as such,
Mhm.
right? There's nothing I can do to change that,
Right.
which is why I need to stipulate that if Earthbound never existed, right?
Right.
No one knows what it was and it just released today.
Mhm.
I think there would still be a cult following of it. I still
Yeah.
think there'd be a lot of avid JRPG fans that would really love it.
Mhm.
But I do think that it would not really have that same it wouldn't really be as powerful and wouldn't really be seen as that good and as a staple of the genre because you need to look at it as a product of its time, and you need to look at what came after it and what was inspired from it, because that's where a lot of the power of like older games come from, right? I'm a big person that just kind of goes around and says that like old games are generally not very good. Like
this is also something I don't agree with. We might come back to this.
We will. But there's a lot of really old games that are not particularly great and that don't hold up to modern standards. But when you look at the legacy they've left and you look at what they were at the time, I mean, it's a technological marvel, right? And you have to really appreciate it, right? So, for example, I mean, I don't know if we need to get into this. This is too far. But like,
where are we going?
I mean, like, I think Evangelion is not a good show.
Oh, man.
By modern standards.
Oh, man.
Right? Now, do I love and appreciate it for what it is? Yes.
Okay.
Right? But if Evangelion released today, I mean
it did. We got rebuilds.
No, the as is. All right,
I got
the
you.
26 episodes released today. I wouldn't watch any of it except for the last two, and I would be laughing drunk while watching the last two after seeing none of the rest of it.
Oh, man.
Because I'd see GIFs on Twitter and be like, I have to see what the fuck this is.
I gotta say, right now, this is a bit of a tangent, but this is being recorded while like the second chunk of Attack on Titan Season 2 is coming in the wild. And deeply in my bones, I'm fearing that we're getting an incomplete Evangelion ending, because I feel like there's just so much that still has to happen here. I don't know if we're going to get to do that within the runtime. Yeah. And I think we might get to assess that in real time shortly.
I hope you're ready for Attack on Titan Final Season Part 3.
The movie.
I mean, that's definitely going to happen.
I'm scared. I'm scared. Is what I'll say. He might be right. I don't know. I can't know.
Okay, but getting back just slightly to JRPGs, right? Back all the way many minutes ago to random encounters.
Okay, random encounters.
Random encounters have no place in a modern day.
I would think
they shouldn't exist.
Yeah, I would say with pretty much without exception, overwhelmed encounters are going to be preferable. Any way you do it. I understand, like, in the past, that was a hard thing to do, right? Like, the only game that was really doing that was pretty much Chrono Trigger. And it was so difficult to do that, it didn't really become a thing again until, I don't know, maybe PlayStation 2 era for those feeling adventurous.
Yeah.
I guess the Earthbound games do that.
Yeah.
But not a common thing until, like, honestly, like right now. Yeah.
So now that I've gotten you to partially agree with me, I'm going to take it even further. I'm just going to keep taking it further. Yeah, I'm twisting it. All right. So next, Dragon Age 11. We've spoken of this.
Dragon
briefly.
Age? Not Quest. Age?
Dragon Quest, sorry.
Okay.
Dragon Quest.
There's 11 of them.
not a JRPG.
Okay.
Dragon Quest 11. That, those overworld encounters, also bad.
What's the issue with them?
The issue with them, okay, is that you can't control player level.
Okay.
Because grinding still exists, there's still the ambiguity of what level you're supposed to be. So that's why we get that line in the Tim Rogers review on Kotaku of Dragon Quest XI, that it's better if you're under-leveled. The reason he needs to say that is because people don't know it.
I think...
And if the game isn't teaching you that, the game has failed in at least some regard. Now, I'm not saying Dragon Quest XI is a failure, all right?
Okay.
I don't want death threats. I don't want death threats.
Well, not that level of heat.
Yeah, I'm saying in some way, all right?
Okay.
In this way, it failed.
I would shake hands for is a shortcoming as opposed to a failure. Because I don't think the game has any real responsibility for it to be like, here's going to be the most enjoyable way to play. I think few genres even do that.
I think games should.
I think maybe games that do are better, but I don't know if necessarily games should.
So here's something you need to understand about me, Ralph, and viewers. I'm a big dumb idiot. All right, I'm a dumb baby boy.
Me too. Got a lot in common.
If a game lets me play it poorly and make the game worse, I will find that way.
Okay.
All right.
Here's a point on this note, and this might also be a bit of a tangent. But were you did you get to see any of the David Jaffe like Metroid situation?
No.
In this man, he's one of the lead designers of like the PlayStation 2 era God of War games. He got himself into some Twitter hot water with Metroid Dread, where he got lost in like a fairly early section of the game. It's still tutorialing. He's maybe 30 minutes in.
Yeah.
There was like a design cue for him to shoot a wall that he didn't pick up on. And then spent about 2 to 3 hours backtracking the like very few rooms that were available for him, trying to figure out what to do next until someone in his chat thread told him to shoot the ceiling, got outraged, gave it like a 2 out of 10 worst game of the year situation.
Okay. I need to be clear. I can't have a fully formulated take on this.
Right.
I haven't played that game specifically. I don't know all of the context. I haven't even seen the clip. I would say that's probably unreasonable.
Right. Like
I can say that.
Yeah. I would say like that's kind of indicative of the direction where I'm like any game can like point you in the direction that you should be going, that like is probably going to be the most enjoying, most rewardable, the direction of the progress. But no game is really going to force you down that path. Like any game will let you make like outrageous mistakes.
The reason I want to differentiate my take from that, and again, I don't really know the context of this, so they could be more similar than I think, but that doesn't seem like something that the average person and the majority of players would encounter. Right? It's not like the most people who played that game ran into that issue and called the game bad. Right? This was one person who made a dumb mistake, which we've all done.
Right. We've all done it. Yeah. We've all done that specifically in Metroid.
I'm not here to shame that man. All right. It's fair. I'm fine with you feeling like a game makes you feel like an idiot, so you don't ever want to touch it.
Every day of my life, right?
Yeah, that's fair. But the problem with JRPGs is that most people make this mistake. People don't know this about JRPGs because the vast majority of the games make this problem where they have been teaching us for years that you should grind to overlevel to be able to beat things.
I'm trying to think if I want to fight the idea that games have been teaching us to overlevel. Again, I think games have allowed us to overlevel, but I don't know if they've like generally taught us that the solution is to go back, grind, and then approach again.
Out. Okay, so this is another point we've talked about briefly before. But games don't teach you any other way. JRPGs specifically, I should clarify. Like turn-based JRPGs don't teach you about the game. So I've mentioned this to you before, but there have been times where I've been playing a JRPG and I've been wanting to understand the mechanics because I like to understand the way that the games work so I can get better at them, right? It never works because, again, as established, I'm a big dumb idiot, baby, all right? But I at least try and fail. But so I look in the game's menu, right? I search through, like, you can usually find, like, tutorials and help and, like, descriptions of a lot of different stuff. And a lot of times, games won't even, like, JRPGs won't even tell you what the stats mean.
That I would say that's certainly pretty true of, like, the truly archaic ones, right? Like, if we're talking about something pre-PS1 era, that's to be expected.
I mean, like, I don't think that Fire Emblem, which is not, it's a tactics game, but I think it's fair to compare somewhat.
I'm wearing a Fire Emblem hat right now.
But that game, I don't think it even teaches you how like multi-hits are calculated.
I would think not. I think that's
but that's important to know. You need to know that in order to be really good at a Fire Emblem game, right? In order to beat Fire Emblem games on higher difficulties, knowing if your attack or the opponent's attack is going to double is extremely important, and the game doesn't teach you. So that I think is common in most turn-based JRPGs, right?
I think that's fair.
I think that's a fairly common occurrence.
I would go as far as to say most digital games probably don't go so far as to teach like the numerical depth of like what systems are being calculated here. I think that's true of shooters. I think that's true of platformers. But the fact that it applies in such a direct way in JRPGs is a bit unique.
Well, so in my view, and you know, you can let me know if you see differently. The only way that you can defend JRPGs as a genre is to classify them as a pseudo puzzle game.
I think I would.
So if you look at boss encounters, they are a puzzle which needs to be solved.
Correct.
Puzzle games need more complete information than other games do, like action games, right? So, for example, Kingdom Hearts, it doesn't teach you all of the depth of everything that happens.
There's no hitboxes that show up to say, like, here's your timing window.
Yeah.
Like, you might get, like, a rough approximation of that.
Yeah,
but...
and honestly, in, like, Kingdom Hearts 2 FM, like, the descriptions for what abilities do are not very clear a lot of the time. But you can learn through experimentation, and because it's an action game, you can express your own player skill differently, right?
Right.
Whereas in JRPGs, turn-based JRPGs, what you need to do is you need to solve the puzzle of how to beat this particular boss. And in order to do that, you need to understand the mechanics of the game. Right? So if the game doesn't teach you how to understand the mechanics of the game, if it doesn't give an easy avenue to that, you see only one other option, which is your stats increase when you kill a certain number of things. So you need to kill more things to get your stats higher.
But by that logic, wouldn't you also be able to argue that, like, you're able to see that, like, enemy weaknesses are exploitable and that they give you, like, additional opportunity for tactics? Because say something that's using like a press turn system or a variant, so like your SMTs and personas.
Yeah,
like numbers go up when you level. This is a thing that's true and inarguable, right?
Yeah.
That said, it's actually kind of hard to level in those games.
Yeah.
But it's very easy to come in and see they're like, hey, if I hit someone with a nice attack, I get an additional turn, and that can be exploited on. And if the enemy does that to me, I will also lose a turn, and they'll get an additional action.
You and I, though, have spent many times looking over some SMT and Persona boss battles and laughing at how ridiculously unbalanced they are.
They can be. I would say keep going.
So where I'm going with this is that yes, those games do show you that this is a possible avenue towards solution, but if you encounter a bullshit enough boss, right, you might get to the same point of like, fuck it, I just need to grind more, right? There is still, even if some games don't necessarily have that same issue, they don't do enough to separate themselves. I would say that like your SMTs and your personas need to do more to teach players how to utilize the systems and need to do more to discourage leveling, right?
Okay.
So, for example, a lot of Persona games, Persona 5 I think has a big issue with this, but like Persona 4, for example, it has a really good system where your time in the dungeon is really limited.
Right.
Because of SP management and all of these things. Like, and I know there's ways to break the game, so that isn't an issue. But for a casual player, first-time player, you're pretty limited in how much time you can spend in the dungeon. You're also discouraged from going into the dungeon because a really enjoyable part of the game is the social links and exploring and meeting all of the characters. So Persona 4 actually does a decent job at discouraging grinding just through its mechanics.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also agree on the Persona 5 take because I feel like Persona 5 really incentivizes on the gameplay standpoint, just going through the dungeon in as big a dive as you can until you hit like an impossible barrier. I think it's way more enjoyable if you come in a little bit each day. It's probably more like what the heart of the game wants to push.
I think that the way that Persona 5, and we're just so in the weeds right now. But the heart of it, like it just kind of makes the game bad, right? Like the dungeons are some of the best dungeons that I'll say the best dungeons that the Persona series has had.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah,
like I mean, because before that they're largely
like randomized. Yeah,
they're randomized. They're not really properly designed.
Someone's hand didn't make this.
Yeah, and I mean the battles and the animations, like so much of it is really great and really enjoyable, and they just ruin it.
I wouldn't go as far as to say that they ruin it. It's certainly less of a good time than it could be.
Have you spent hours just grinding in a dungeon afterwards to get high enough levels?
Just grinding in a dungeon? No.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, well, I have.
Oh,
again,
why'd you do that?
Baby idiot. Well, because I want to be able to do the next dungeon. When you're in a dungeon, all right, I want to only ever go in every dungeon for one day, which isn't possible. But I want to do that. Because all I want to do, I just want to play a visual novel. I'll admit it. When I play Persona, I just want to play a visual novel.
I think you and I both understand in our hearts that like the true appeal of the JRPG comes from the appeal of the genre's progenitor, the eroge. The erotic cave is the heart of the Japanese role-playing game.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right.
But so I will spend as much time in the dungeon as the game allows me to, so that I never have to do it again. And as a result of that, you get overleveled, and then you just start hating it.
Yeah,
and I understand
that certainly becomes a grind, right?
I understand that it's my fault.
No one's making you do this. We understand.
No one's making you do this.
There are so many other options.
I understand that I shouldn't do it, and that it's my fault for doing it. But also, I'm not the only person that does
You're
that.
far from it.
You yourself even just admitted that the game encourages you to spend as much time in the dungeon, to go through the whole dungeon in one day, right? The game actively encourages you to do that, whereas, like in Persona 4 and previous games, it should be discouraging that.
Right.
It should be trying to stop you from doing that at every moment. And I think that that's a fundamental issue, is that, I do think that games should hold your hand to some extent and make sure that you aren't playing the game in a bad way, right?
Right.
Like, they should force you to not play the game in a way that makes it unenjoyable.
I think there's like a bit of your argument that I definitely do agree with, where it's like the way that like level scaling gets handled as you approach could be better. And like I wouldn't advocate necessarily for like universal level scaling where enemies keep your same current level as you go. I think that disincentivizes progress.
I would say that even in that, it doesn't actually solve the problem.
I would agree.
Look at Final Fantasy VIII.
Right.
I mean, Final Fantasy VIII has level scaling, but I had times where I was playing Final Fantasy VIII, and because I knew it had level scaling, I wasn't fighting random encounters.
You just avoid
and so I was
combat.
Under-leveled. And as a result of that, you don't have access to higher level magic, which you need to solve the puzzle of a boss.
Right. The game that I was gonna bring up was gonna be Paper Mario Origami King, and modern Paper Mario as a whole.
Sure.
Well, a lot of these games have just like discarded leveling systems as a whole.
Yeah.
And
so they're not RPGs.
I would still say they're RPGs, but you still have an overworld and like a combat encounter that goes to a separate battle screen, which plays out in a turn-based fashion. So I'm gonna say
you finish your original point, and then we can argue the semantics of what the genre is.
All right. But these games don't have leveling in them at all, and what that results in is a little reason to go out of your way to engage in combat. And like the combat itself is still rewarding. The bosses are very literally puzzles in these games. But I think there's benefit to be had, and like an appeal of the genre that's fairly unique to the genre. It is the type of growth that you do get from the day-to-day random encounters or overworld encounters. I think like being able to see yourself grow from there and going back to previous areas that like maybe you had a harder time with is empowering and is part of the appeal of the genre.
Yeah, so first of all, Paper Mario series, that's a turn-based puzzle game. And let me ask you something, Ralph.
Okay.
All right. Why are RPGs called RPGs?
Because they derive from earlier role-playing games like Wizardry and Dungeons and Dragons.
What is the mechanics of tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons? What are the mechanics?
Generally, turn-based combat that's calculated on a piece of paper via numbers.
No, actually, a lot of the time, they don't have to necessarily have turn-based combat because you can do narrative encounters, right?
Right.
The actual only rules of tabletop RPGs, a lot of the time, are leveling systems. You see where I'm going with this?
Keep going.
Video games that are RPGs are just games that have leveling systems. A leveling system is what makes an RPG an RPG. Now, no. That's not necessarily what a JRPG is.
Okay.
Because a JRPG means a specific thing. It is more in reference to your Dragon Quests and your Final Fantasies,
right.
Which we have to also admit is directly inspired from tabletop RPGs.
Right.
Like,
Dragon Quest is very literally like an adaptation of Wizardry with the interface from Portopia.
Yeah, and Final Fantasy 1 is pretty much just, I mean, they took Monster straight out of the Monster Manual.
I mean, it was literally like, hey, this Dragon Quest game is showing a certain niche market we could capitalize on.
Yeah, Bahamut is only called Bahamut because that's what he's called in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
In actual mythology, Bahamut is a fish.
Yes, correct.
The Platinum Dragon is distinctly Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
But so back to the point. RPGs, they are only the leveling system. If you describe a game as an RPG, it has to have a leveling system. That's why when people describe RPGs they talk about expansive stories, right? They talk about large overworlds. They're talking about all sorts of things. You're talking about an adventure game, bro. That's an adventure game.
But at this point, like, well, now that we're in an era where pretty much every game has a leveling system of some kind. Mario Kart has a leveling system within it.
It has a progression system.
There are unlocks that are met by conditions on a bar that goes up with numbers. I mean, what do you call that?
A progression system?
What's another word for progression? Leveling. I don't know. I think it's a slippery slope to be like only games with leveling get to be within this subgenre, especially like one like. When we're talking about Japanese role-playing games specifically, there's so much additional like baggage and tropes that comes with that. Like the separation between like overworld and like a battle screen, the storytelling tropes that come with it, the visual like iconography that's usually associated with like the like Japanese media and manga in general.
Separation between overworld and battle screen?
Right.
Chrono Trigger?
Chrono Trigger was unique because it messed with that.
But also modern games don't really have that as much, do they? Dragon Quest XI doesn't have it.
Dragon Quest XI certainly has a transition to a battle screen.
Right, but the overworld and the battle screen are pretty much the same.
It loads an instance of the overworld, but the battle program and the overworld team are two separate teams. Different people handle those, and it's kind of been that way for a long time.
Sure, but my point is that a game can remove those other features.
I would agree. I think you can remove like any one part of it while still maintaining the core of its genre. And I think
I think the core of its genre is the leveling system.
I don't know if I agree with this.
You can remove anything else. You can't remove that.
I don't know.
All right. Other than Paper Mario, name a classic, iconic JRPG to the level of something like Chrono Trigger, right? Which I was able to name in an instant, that doesn't have a leveling system.
I'm trying to think if Secret of Mana has a leveling system. I do believe that it does.
Yeah. I'll challenge anyone in the comments. Fight me on this. If you can name a classic JRPG, right? Like a classic that everyone will think of that has no leveling system, I'll back down.
Okay.
I'll back down.
That's fair. I don't know if I actually have one off the top of my head. I actually think it'd be pretty difficult to try and find one. But I don't know if I would identify that as being the singular component that makes something a JRPG.
No, it's not the singular component that makes something a JRPG. It is the singular component that makes something an RPG.
Okay.
So there are other factors, like all of the factors you mentioned do go into a JRPG. But I would say that if you're missing those, if you don't even meet the bare minimum for an RPG, you can't meet then the subcategory of a JRPG.
I think I agree
of an
with
RPG,
that.
which is a JRPG.
Yeah, I think I'm going with that. Yeah.
All right. So I don't know. I think that's all the points that we have. Do you have any closing remarks? Do you have anything you want to jump at?
RPGs are great. You should play them. Mother 3, you should play that.
You should. You should absolutely play any RPG that released 20 years ago, and none that released today.
Well, you should play The World Ends With You. You should play Bravely Default. They get weird with their leveling system. You should play Tales of Arise. That's not turn-based.
That's not turn-based.
You
should play Tales of Arise. Absolutely, everyone, go home and play Tales of Arise.
Do what you want, boys. Have a good one.
Let us know in the comments who you think won. Who do you think is right here? Which one of us is more reasonable? If you think Ralph is correct, then like the video, because most people will. And if you think I'm right, dislike the video, because everyone's going to
I don't know
not
if dislikes are a
that.
thing. Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, no one's going to notice it.
Do that.
It's just going to look like Ralph is
we'll
correct.
know. We'll know.
But let us know in the comments. What else do you do? Subscribe? You do that?
You could, yeah. Hit bells. Are there bells?
Yeah, there's bells.
Yeah,
I don't know what
bells.
they do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do what you want.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was it for us. Peace out, everyone.
Bye.